Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cheese O'Clock. In case you don't already know, we are in for an incredible hour. These four Italian all-star cheeses are truly all-stars. I kind of don't even want to eat them because they're so beautiful to look at. It's really going to be a spectacular hour. And we have with us two amazing guests. We have Emily Pickrell, who is the master sommelier with Jackson Family Wines, and we have Michelle Buster, who is the co-founder, owner of everything, at least of Forever Cheese, which is a fantastic importer of Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese cheeses. But first, of course, I have to introduce my colleague, Janet Fletcher, who is not only, obviously, we all know, knows a lot about cheese, but she is an Italophile, if ever there were one, and speaks the language too, which I'm very jealous of. So Janet, tell us a little more about yourself.
Grazie, Laura. And actually, I don't think she said that's Laura Werlin.
Oh, I didn't. It's true.
So, that's Laura Werlin. She's the author of several books on cheese. She does a lot of speaking and presenting on cheese, and she's my fabulous. She's the cheese lady, and it's just been so fun to present together over the last year in this series we call Cheese O'Clock, and it's just kind of our way to stay connected to the world of cheese and the cheese people we love, and hope we bring a good time to you as well, and get some wine into the equation so we can talk about pairing a little bit as well. So that's what Cheese O'Clock is, and I just hope that you, if you made a beautiful cheese board, you'll take a picture of it and post it. Hashtag Cheese O'Clock. Our Laura and my social tags are on the main screen. She's at Cheese Lady, and I'm at Janet Fletcher NV. So please tag us. And if you want to, do a selfie of your screen, that would be with you and your screen. That would be really fun. Also to post, we would love to see that. So that's what I have to say so far about Cheese O'Clock, and I will turn it back over to Laura.
Okay. Yeah. So selfie. This is what you do. All right. You hold your phone up there. You get your screen in the picture, you get your cheeses in the picture, you get it all, and then and post it. And it's super fun, actually. It's a nice little memento of the hour. Okay, so I mentioned Emily Pickrell, and now I'll mention her a little bit more. She is our wine guest today, and she is with Jackson Family Wines. She started, she's basically touched on every part of the wine industry. She was a server at the heralded restaurant in New York City called Gramercy Tavern. She then went and worked for an importer. She worked with the winery in the Napa Valley. She then connected with Jackson Family Wines and worked with them and their distributor. And now she's the Southeast rep for Spire Collection, which is a really, it's a line of Jackson Family Wines that she can tell us more about. But Emily is also a master sommelier, which is a very, very prestigious, I don't know what to call it. It's not an award because you earn it, but I think we all know what master somm is. And anyway, Emily, welcome to Cheese O'Clock.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. First of all, I'm loving seeing everybody give the shout out in the chat box. It's nice to see so many different regions, not only of the United States. I saw Canada out there. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about the wines that you have in your glass tonight that we're pairing with the cheeses. So the first one is actually not Italian, but it's Italian inspired, and it comes from the Alexander Valley, which is a part of Sonoma County in Northern California. And it's a rosé of Sangiovese. So Sangiovese is a grape that's native to Italy. And back in the 80s and 90s, it was planted in California, but not a lot of it is planted there anymore. So this is somewhat of a unique variety to see coming out of California in general, and especially the Alexander Valley. So this is actually a field selection from a very old vineyard, old by California standards, definitely not by Italian standards, in that the vines are about 50 years old, which is very old by New World wine standards. So the winemaker who was working with this vineyard to make Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot-based red wine blends discovered this unique parcel of old vine Sangiovese kind of embedded in this vineyard site, and decided it would be a perfect wine from which to make a rosé. So Sangiovese is known to be really high in acid, and acid is the backbone for great rosé around the world. So as soon as he tasted the grapes on the vine, he thought this would be a blockbuster rendition of a Sangiovese style rosé. So this is all stainless steel fermented. It's really lean, it's bright and crisp. And again, I just want to highlight that acidity. You get on the nose a lot of kind of fresh strawberry and floral blossom characteristics, but on the palate itself, you get that big punch of acid that makes your mouth water. It's very cleansing. And as we taste this wine with the cheeses, and you get that combination of kind of fat and salt from the cheese and that punch of acidity, I'm excited to hear what you guys maybe think about the pairings as you put your input in the chat box. And the second wine that we're tasting is from Italy, but it's also made from the Sangiovese grape variety. So the second wine is the Tenuta d'Arceno Chianti Classico Reserva, and Laura's holding up the bottle there.
I'm a little bit washed out, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Yeah. So this comes from a distinct single vineyard site in the southern end of the Chianti Classico region, just outside of the town of Siena. And this particular area of Chianti is a little bit warmer, and so they can successfully ripen some international grape varieties in this part of Chianti, specifically Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. So what makes this Chianti somewhat unique is it is based on Sangiovese, like all true Chianti Classico. It's 90% Sangiovese, but it does have 10% Cabernet Sauvignon blended into it. And what the Cabernet brings is a punch of structure. So you get a little bit more tannin impact and a little bit more concentration and richness of fruit. This is definitely what I would call a modern style of Chianti. So you do get more of that fruit forward, like I say, concentrated, a lot of power in this wine. It's not a thin kind of pizza wine. It's nothing that you would see in a pizzeria and the straw flasked fiascos. This is a serious table wine. It's definitely age worthy, and it's got a really beautiful combination of tannins and acids and that fruit flavor, which I think will pair really well with a couple of the cheeses later on in the tasting. So I wanted to show you guys this vineyard site in Tuscany. It's so beautiful, and we have a little video of what the vineyard looks like. This vineyard was actually an old Etruscan hunting lodge. So that is the original building there that people stayed in when they came to hunt cingale or wild boar on this property. It was planted to a vineyard site in the 1600s. So it's been a vineyard for quite some time, but its history is an old Etruscan hunting ground. So really beautiful site there. Like I say, that's in the southern end of Chianti Classico, just outside of Siena.
Wow, that is just so beautiful. So where can we all stay when we go there?
There's a town outside of the vineyard called San Gusme, and I think it has a population of maybe 50 people, but there are some places you can stay in San Gusme.
Okay. Well,
just come hang out in Rome, and then we'll go up from there.
There you go.
It's gorgeous. All right, well, let's get into the cheese here, because I'm just so anxious to do so, and also to try them with the wines that sound so delicious, even more so now that you've described them. Okay, so the first cheese is one that
I think, are we going to bring in Michelle a little bit? I was going to just introduce
we can do that.
I said I introduced our other guest. There's another person on a screen here that you haven't met yet, and this is Michelle Buster. And Michelle is I'm delighted to introduce her because she is a legend in her own time, and I've known her forever since I started getting into cheese. Michelle is the reason that when you go into a cheese shop, an independent cheese shop, or even a Whole Foods, and you see some really interesting Italian and Spanish cheeses, it's 90% likely that it's because of Michelle. She has gone through every back corner and back street in Italy and Spain and found the most amazing cheeses and just revolutionized the import world. She's a cheese importer with a company called Forever Cheese. She owns Forever Cheese. She brings in nothing but the best. And we'll give her a chance to speak later because we're serving 2 of her cheeses. And so she'll introduce us to those. But she is just, everybody in the cheese world knows and, bows down to Michelle. Her company's about a little more than 20 years old. 2 other words about Michelle: Marcona almonds. You love them, right? We all love Marcona almonds. Michelle discovered them, and she's the reason we have them in the US, and she's the reason, we have them on every cheese board. So thank you. God bless you, Michelle. And just want to remind everybody to use the chat to, connect with each other and to ask questions. We're going to keep an eye on the chat. Also, you can use the Q&A function, and we will try to get to questions both throughout the event and also at the end for sure. So I'm going to remind you, 2 more cheese o'clocks after this one on March 4th and March 11th. Please sign up, and there's still time until tomorrow to order the cheese for March 11th, which is, the theme is aged to perfection. It's all cheeses that have been aged and have blossomed because of their aging. So, and the last thing I want to remind you about is that we do record all these sessions. So you can go back and listen to them. I know there are some people whose cheese has not shown up tonight because of Mother Nature. So they can certainly go on my site and find the recordings within 24 hours of the session and, have cheese o'clock all over again. So please do take a look at that if you'd like to revisit cheese o'clock. Laura, I think now we're ready for our first cheese.
I get so excited. I just have to jump right into the cheese. Also, I'm not very good at reading scripts, apparently. So thank you for keeping me on track there, Janet. I appreciate it. Okay. So now for the Cacciatona Cacciatona Capra di Capra Foglie di Noce. Okay, so it's goat cheese and walnut leaves, but it's much less simple than that. So this is the cheese we're on. Sorry, the sun is playing tricks with me here. And this is made by the Perensin family, which has been making cheese for 5 generations in the northeast part of Italy. And they're in an area, it's pretty gorgeous, actually. It's about an hour north of Venice. And it's I think it's technically in the Friuli. And they are in the region of one of the best known sparkling wines, which is the Prosecco area. And it's I was going to try to say it, but I have a mental block about how to say Valdaba Debene, but that's not how you say it. Yeah, thank you. I know everyone, but I mean, I've been there and I still can't say it. But anyway, it's where Prosecco, the Glera grape, is grown. And but this cheese, so it is capra, which is goat. And what they do is, the goats, first of all, this is organic. The goats live essentially in a national park in the Dolomites, and they are at an altitude of about 1,800 to 2,400 feet. So, so they're happy little goats. And what the Perensin et al. Do is they go and they pick the walnut leaves in the spring and in the summer. So they're green at the time. And originally the leaves were used to basically prevent mold from what it's believed is that the walnut leaves in particular, the tannins in them would prevent undesirable molds from growing on the cheese. And so it protected it so that the cheese could continue to age and not have to suffer from, like I say, from unwanted molds. And what's so amazing about this cheese, well, it's not only just beautiful, but it's made with pasteurized milk, but it's aged anywhere from like 4 to 11 months. It obviously has a long lifespan. This one I think is on the younger side. And I have to just read what the marketing or account manager said, and you all can decide whether you concur with him. So what he says is, the herbaceous and balsamic scent, I don't know what balsamic smells like exactly, but okay. of the walnut leaf blends and mixes with the sweetness of the goat's milk flavor. In some cases, you can feel an evolution of aromas that recall the taste of banana. So this is either up to your imagination or your exact experience, but this is what the account manager told Janet in an email just today. So, but that was, anyway, that's what he said. So I'm wrong. This is age from 3 to 7 months, not 11. All right. So shall we try it? Maybe you already have.
You know, I have, and I have to say, I don't know how cheese can get any more delicious. This is just impeccable, and I can't stop eating it. It's got that balance of sweet and tart, and you get that, you know, your gastric juice is going because of the tartness, but it's sweet. It's got a caramel note as well that I just love. And
it also has a bit of a, I want to say piney, a little bit of a piney, or just maybe it's just the leaves. It's not really pine, not like rosemary or something, but it does. But those leaves definitely impart something to it. I don't know about banana, but
yeah, I get the banana, but there was that kind of a pale caramel, really light caramel, like dulce de leche kind of taste. And you know, I didn't really think it was going to go with the rosé, even though I think this is going to be like my house wine for the next 6 months.
Delicious.
But I thought it did because of the acid, because they both have good acid. But what did you think, Emily, about was there a better wine pairing for you with this cheese?
No, I actually think this was one of the most versatile cheeses in terms of pairing with both of the wines. So I love goat cheese and the tangy acidity with goat cheese, typically with a Sauvignon Blanc. And I think the rosé is kind of the next best thing to the Sauvignon Blanc because it does have that really bright, lean, crisp acidity, like you mentioned. But you all were talking about those caramelly flavors and the aged quality of the cheese. This is a hard cheese, so the fat content is a little higher. You know, some of the water's been evaporated out. And typically those higher tannin red wines pair better with harder cheeses. So I think this was an example of a cheese that you could do either or.
I agree with that.
But I'm curious to see what Michelle thought about that, being the cheese expert. They're all cheese experts.
I was really pleased that you could make a case for both of them. I thought that the acidity really did. I mean, I love to say, you know, I want high acid wines to go with my goat cheeses. But because of the age nature different in what it is, and it has all of those deep complex notes, and it can really hold up to the roundness and the fruitiness without getting overpowered or without making the wine seem flabby and the cheese seem off. The hardest thing for me is to have the two wines side by side because they clash for me a little bit. But when I put the cheese in the middle, it offers a great balance on either side between them. I thought cheeses were really kind of like two-timing it, and we're great on that.
I think that's an awesome problem.
I think it's important to point out that this cheese, the Parenzine family, they didn't make it. They are what's called they're in French, you would say an affineur, a cheese ager. And they do make some cheeses, but this one they did not make. They bought it. They buy it young from the producer, and then they age it. And that is their expertise. They bring it into their caves and take it from, you know, infancy to the time that it's ready to release. Michelle, do you know the Parenzines?
I've met them, yes. And do you know that you chose 3 out of the 4 cheeses are all cheeses done through affinage?
Yeah.
So I was
it's a real skill. I mean, you have to start with a great cheese, great milk, and it has to be made properly from the beginning. But the skill that the affineur brings to it, the ager brings to it, is something you can't underestimate. It's really very important.
I'm like racking my brain for the name of like the owner, the cheesemaker, the guy, because we were hanging out in Prague for cheese and we were having drinks at this one place, but he was very interesting man. But they make
it's an art. I'm sorry, Michelle. It's an art that we're just learning in this country, and I mean, to say that we're in our infancy in terms of cheese aging is really almost an overstatement. There are a few people that do it, Jasper Hill most notably in Vermont, but it is something that we haven't. Who?
Crown finish cakes.
Oh yeah, their cheeses don't really get around that much, and so But that is indeed what they do in Brooklyn. And so it is really just something that we can't really appreciate yet because we don't understand what it is because we don't see it here. And so as Janet was saying, just to underscore, thank you for bringing that up. It was a very important point, Janet, that you have somebody, it's almost like the cheese maker, they know what they're making, they know, but it's the cheese ager who really makes that cheese into something that we want to eat and that we're, waxing poetic over. And so they're like the parents of the cheese, and they're raising it and making it something that we all want to be and have. So it's a really very cool sort of concept that, like I say, we don't really have yet here. Hopefully someday.
Well, let's go on to our next cheese, which is very similar in the sense that it is also done, made by a small outfit in the mountains, and then Casa Maddaio, the producer, ages it. And this is called Pagliarino, which in Italian means it's straw colored, which it is. Can we show our map? Because we have a map of Italy that shows where these cheeses are from and where our Chianti is from all over Italy. So the first cheese we had, the Cacciatona, is up, as Laura said, in the Dolomites, in that far north eastern corner of Italy, kind of near the Austrian border. And our blue is going to come from there as well, very nearby. The cheese we're having now, the Pagliarino, comes from, it's the southernmost cheese. You can see it down south of Naples from the Amalfi Coast. And then we have the Chianti, which is in the middle, near Siena, south of Florence. And Michelle will introduce us to the water buffalo cheese we're going to have, which is made in Lombardy, near Milan. So we're covering a lot of ground with this tasting. Okay, so let me tell you about the Pagliarino. 100% sheep's milk. Casa Maddaio is the ager. Maddaio is a family name. They've been making and aging cheese for 4 generations. And the story is actually very similar to the Peranzine story, because they find the cheese, from a small producer in the mountains, and then they take it into their caves, which are in this national park. It's called the national park. It's another national park. It's a national park of the Cilento. And the funny thing is, today I was typing in National Park of Cilento, and autocorrect wrote National Park of Cilantro. So one of these days I want to go to
it's a very herbaceous place.
But this is from the Cilento. And, we think of sheep cheeses from Italy as being either from Tuscany or from Sardinia or Sicily. We don't think of them so much from this area of Naples. This area is famous for water buffalo, for mozzarella. So it's unusual that they're making sheep cheese here. But this is, it's straw color that comes from age. It's a smaller cheese. It's maybe 2 or 3 pounds, and it's aged for maybe 3 months. So it's going to be kind of drier. And I like and it's got this natural rind, just what happens in the caves. Let's break it and smell it where you broke it, because that's where you're going to get the most aroma, kind of like having that fresh pour of wine in your glass. I get a fruity note and kind of a warm butter note. It's brittle.
It's really.
It's sort of. I'm shaving mine, so I'm not doing it the same way as you. But it's and so in this way, it really melts on the tongue so nicely.
And I chiseled mine from the wheel. Like I tried to take each one of the textures and do a different way of cutting it, because it releases the aromas differently.
It does.
I get butterscotch. I get like crystallized butterscotch.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting a little pineapple note, kind of a fruitiness. But what I love about these sheep cheeses, and this is this is my favorite style of cheese, these aged sheep cheeses, they have this balance of sweetness and salt, and that makes you want to keep coming back for another taste. And they are just wonderful wine cheeses. So I haven't had a chance to try them with the wine, but I bet you have, Emily.
Yes, I have. Yeah. There's an interesting kind of adage in wine for food and wine pairing that says what goes together. And I find that this wine or this cheese is the closest in proximity to the Tenuta de Archeno vineyard, because I think that this pairing was really, really successful. Just like Michelle said, she got all that caramelization. I think I picked up a lot of that, but it's a very assertive, very, very flavorful cheese. And I loved the assertiveness of the red wine next to it. I thought that they really balanced each other out kind of in between bites. One component didn't take over the other, but they just complemented each other so well. And I also thought that this particular cheese was a little too assertive and too flavorful next to the rosé.
I have a little condiment for my cheese board. You can't see my cheese board, but I was just digging around in my pantry, and I found, I don't think you can see it, but it's this great mostarda. It's a pear mostarda. And this is a great cheese to put a mostarda with, as I think the first cheese would have been. These more intense aged cheeses are just great with this Italian mostarda, which, by the way, Michelle brings in. It's the best mostarda there is. The name is Casa, I Tamarici is the brand name, I guess. Le Tamarici.
Well, we have our own label for the States, so it's Casa Forcello, but
Casa Forcello.
Paula is Le Tamarici, yes.
Yeah, so,
and
these cheeses are a great excuse to
spicy
bring
mozzarella.
in.
It's perfect for it. Yeah, I agree.
One of the things about this cheese is that a lot of people, when they hear pecorino, just as a generic word, they think salty. And this cheese has salt, but I would not call it salty. That is not the first thing that came to me at all. It's really balanced. And so my point is that not all pecorini are alike at all. And certainly Toscana is different. It's not salty. The southern, when you get down to Sicily or Sardinia, some of those are, or of course, one that you have, Michelle, the Fulvi is pretty darn salty. And the Romano.
Look at it.
And it's for pasta.
Well, that's what it is for. Exactly. It's not a table cheese.
And it is a table cheese, but that's another cheese o'clock. We can do it all on the 1,000 shades of pecorino, because there's literally like 1,000 of them.
So Michelle, somebody wants to know what white wine you would pair with pecorino.
Oh, with any pecorino or with this pecorino?
Well, let's just start with this one. Or Emily, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah.
Or none. Maybe no.
I'm going to weigh in since there's silence. When you get this kind of concentration in a cheese that comes from age, and there's just so much flavor packed into each mouthful, I want red wine. I just do. I want the tannin of red wine.
Well, they're asking about white wine.
Yeah, well,
I might go for a Falangina.
I was gonna go somewhere similar. I was thinking, what is something that's really mineral driven that has enough body and weight to go with this amount of flavor? And I love the Falangina suggestion, Fiano. I even maybe like an intense Vermentino out of Tuscany, but I would go an Italian white with Pecorino.
How about a sparkling wine? Emily, do you have any thoughts about whether a sparkling wine would work or too delicate?
No, I don't think too delicate. I think if you were to go with a Blanc de Blanc or even an extra brut style that's extremely dry, that maybe has a little bit of what's called dry extract, which almost has the impression of tannin on your palate because it's so acidic, it dries your mouth out. I think that could definitely work with this cheese.
I think an oaky Chardonnay, like somebody else wrote, that could do it too. I don't keep Chardonnay on my brain too much, but I was more going along with your regional area, and I still wanted good acidity, but I wanted some bit more fruit than like what this was going there. But yeah, for me, I normally say at the end, what you really love, you can make a case for. There's like a few times where you can really see the clash, and like you'll know it because it's like using chalk the wrong way on a chalkboard. But otherwise, I feel like, there's a lot of interpretation to just make what you love work.
Emily, somebody wants to know whether that rosé is going to improve with a little age, or is it like drink it now?
I think rosé has a reputation of being drink it now because it's intentionally produced to be consumed immediately upon release. But that also is kind of a double-edged sword. It works against rosé, that people think that after 6 months it's no longer good. There used to be a saying like you have to drink your rosé through the spring, and by Thanksgiving it's no longer any good. And actually rosé ages better than you would think. It's not a wine I would cellar for 5 or 6 years, but definitely a year or two in bottle will help kind of mellow out the flavors, tamp down the acidity a little bit. But as wine evolves, it develops complexity and kind of secondary flavors that are just subjective to what your palate prefers.
Yeah. And I can attest to that because sometimes I don't get through all the rosé that I have in a particular season. And then I open it the next year and I'm like, why didn't I just hold it anyway? Because it's really good. So that'll happen. Oh, okay, Michelle, you answered. Somebody wanted to know, Janet, what was in that jar of what was the ingredient?
It's the pear mostarda, which is mostarda is a condiment, an Italian condiment, usually made with fruit, sometimes with things like a butternut squash, but it has mustard oil in it. It's it's got a sugar syrup and mustard oil, so it's pungent, a little, peppery and sweet and spicy. And when I was visiting this producer a decade ago, I thought I want to make mostarda at home. So you have to go to the pharmacy to get the mustard because it's mustard oil. It's not like mustard we put on hot dogs. It's a hazmat. And so that at the pharmacy, the people in the white lab coats, they give it to you. They say, how many drops do you want? I said, I'll take 10 drops. So they put 10 drops in a little bottle with a stopper. And I wrapped it in a bunch of stuff in a box, and I put it in my suitcase. And by the time I got home to California, everything in my suitcase smelled like mustard. It's very volatile and it doesn't last. But that's what makes mostarda. And I think the gas is I think it's illegal in this country to sell for home use. So if you try to make mostarda here, you have to, find some kind of substitute.
Yes, Janet, that was illegal contraband, just so you know.
I'm sure. I'm surprised.
Or you might need a license.
Dogs didn't find me.
Yeah. Well, chefs used to always ask me just to bring them. They were like, this mostarda is great, but I want to make my own. Can you just bring me the mostarda? And I was like, I'm not in the hazmat industry. I'm not bringing steel drugs. So
anyway, well, let's move on to our next cheese, which Michelle will be able to tell us a lot about because it's one of hers. And I think we should start by looking. It's called Quadrello. It's made with water buffalo milk. It's from Lombardia in the north, which we saw from a family. And let's watch this video of the family and where this cheese comes from.
Okay.
Lovely. Michelle, would you tell us about Quattro Portoni and the Quadrello?
I would love to. I'm showing you all. Yeah, I'm not just playing with stuffed animals, even though I love them. But This, everyone, is a bison. In the video, you saw buffalo. And I just have to say this because a lot of people think they're interchangeable or that the plural of buffalo is bison. They're two different animals. I don't know anybody making cheese with milk from this animal. So I just had to put that out there because if you Google buffalo plural, it does come up bison. This family is... Sorry, Wikipedia just started telling me about buffalo versus bison, and it was saying it again. Anyway, because everybody thought I was nuts when I walked on today with my stuffed animal. Anyway, this family is the sweetest people inside and out. It's Bruno and Alfio, who got bored of raising cattle in 2000, and they decided to revolutionize things, and they sold off the cattle. They bought some buffalo. They raised them for a while, and they're like, maybe we'll make cheese. Can we make cheese? I don't know. So when they decided to try and make cheese 6 years later, they wanted to take traditional Lombardian recipes and make cheese with the buffalo milk, but it failed completely. It just didn't work because the milk itself is very dense and different. So they had to start from scratch. Quadrello was the first cheese we brought here, and it was by accident. I thought I was ordering one cheese, and I ended up ordering this cheese, and I'm so glad I made this mistake. This is a wash-rind buffalo milk cheese. I don't know if you noticed when you look at it or if you saw in the video, the milk is very like almost greenish, translucent in color, and that's the color of buffalo milk. It's the highest butter fat milk in all the category of milks that you have. The Gritti family have 950 buffalo. That number in the herd is always changing because they're always making a selection of the best animals and taking away the ones that aren't producing as well. They have a sustainable farm. They work off of some green energy. They recycle the waste. I just love their whole philosophy and what they do. Janet, you've been visiting there with me, and hopefully anybody who wants to come there, they're open to the public. They're just wonderful people to deal with. But each one of the cheeses that they do is completely unique. The Quadrello today that we all probably have, mine is a little bit more aged than normal. I'd say the normal aging is about 20, 25 days, but I can tell by looking at my cheese that this one has a little bit more in the flavor because you get a little bit more salty notes than sometimes you get. But it's still super balanced. It's just very almost meaty in a cheese. It's got a creaminess to it. It has just the way it breaks and you can play with it. It's dense. Just when you have it, when you eat it, it just fills your mouth with this silkiness, but you get savory, you get a bit sweet, you get a bit tang, but not too much tang. I actually don't like mozzarella di bufala for that really sour tang in the end. And none of Bruno and Alfio's cheeses has a sour note to it. And that's another reason that I like it.
Do you think it's appropriate to compare it to a taleggio?
It is because what they are trying to do in the end, or what they wanted to do, was to make a taleggio style cheese. And what the primary, most important cheese from the region of Lombardy and in the area of Bergamo where they are, is taleggio. But you can only call taleggio a cheese made with cow's milk and in the valley of Taleggio. What they did do is, like, all these ridges on it come from a similar mold used for taleggio. And what these actually do is, if you saw them flipping the cheese and whatever, there's straw that's used to kind of lift the curd from the whey to help separate the whey. And when you're making young, fresh cheese, you must separate the curds from the whey as fast as possible or your cheese will turn bitter. So having the straw helps lift up the curd and help the whey to run out. And that's really what they did. And then they did a little bit of design because they picked a really cool design that was different from taleggio, so it would be more evident in the case.
What did they
I can make a point. Can I just make a quick point?
Yes.
You sort of touched on this, but I think it's important for people to understand that until the Gritti family brought these water buffalo to Lombardy, nobody did it. Water buffalo were all in the South, and people thought they were nuts. In fact, when they released their first cheese, every TV station sent, a crew because this was news to make water buffalo cheese in
What
northern
was
Italy.
really innovative was that they were the first people to make aged buffalo milk cheese. Nobody had
Even the
ever thought of
mozzarella.
it.
Nobody was making mozzarella. Nobody was making water
But it
buffalo
was
mozzarella.
about
The
making
animals weren't
aged
there.
milk cheeses. People had only made mozzarella di bufala, and they decided to make aged cheeses. It like flipped Italy upside down. People went nuts. Everybody in the South kept calling, and they wanted the recipe. They wanted to know how to do it, and everybody was scrambling, running to copy them. And there became buffalo wars. Up until before the pandemic, there wasn't a free buffalo to be had. There was no buffalo milk to be had. And then it all broke down during the pandemic. It was so heartbreaking. Nobody wanted buffalo anymore. Nobody wanted buffalo milk. We were trying to figure out what's Bruno going to do with all of these beautiful soft cheeses. But thank you for bringing it up. The most important thing that they did was revolutionize everything and make aged buffalo cheese.
So this
Emily, what did you think about the wine? Oh,
Huh?
Sorry.
I'd love to know what Emily thought about the
tripped
wine.
over them. Yeah.
I had a quick question first. I was wondering what they washed the rind in for this cheese.
Salt and water.
Okay. You know, for the people who are wondering about Chardonnay pairing with the Pecorino, I actually really like Chardonnay with wash rind cheeses. I think that wash rind cheeses have that creamy mouth feel that just kind of take over your whole palate, and I like an oak aged white with that. Just kind of like something a little softer and rounder on the palate. Of these two wines, I personally preferred the rosé just because I wanted that punch of acid. I like that subtle tinge of fruitiness of the rosé and kind of like the floral component. I think wash rind cheeses tend to be on the, I'm in layman's terms, I'm going to say stinkier cheese side. I don't know what cheese experts call that, but
that worked.
that kind of florality of the rosé with that stinky cheese component.
So there are a couple things about this that I'm curious about. Well, I actually preferred it with the Tenuta. I felt like it made the rosé, it took some of the fruit out of it for me. It made it a little bit bitter. And so something really interesting happened with this Quadrello, which is that as you had discovered, Michelle, this came vacuum sealed. And so as soon as I received mine, I took it out of the vacuum seal and rewrapped it just loosely kind of in parchment and put it back in the fridge. Well, the difference between when I took it out of the plastics wrap yesterday, and which is when I received it, and today is night and day. When I first took it out, it was, to use your word, Emily, it was very stinky. and then, but tonight it isn't at all. I would not have eaten the rind yesterday. Today, I actually like it. I like the crunchiness of it. It's not strong. But I will say one thing about this cheese that I don't recall having had happened before. And Michelle, I'd like you to weigh in on two things. One is whether you eat the rind or what you have to say to people about that. And the second thing is what I'm getting a little bit of a bite that I sometimes get from alpine cheeses, sometimes mountain cheeses. But I'm getting that with this one, just a little bit of a tingly kind of in the nose histamine sort of a thing when I eat it. So can you speak to both those things, the rind and...
Thank you for bringing it up, because it's one of the most important questions. Do you eat rinds of cheese? And some people are very definitive, yes or no. And I'm like, for me, it's completely subjective. I think it's important to make your own decision. So I think you try the center of the cheese. I think you try the rind, and I think you try it all together and you decide which you like better. There's a couple things to weigh in. One, if you don't like the flavor of mold, most of the time you're not going to enjoy eating the rind, because that's the part where the mold goes. It's also the area where the salt gathers. So as you're making cheese, an important part of a making cheese process is the salting. So whether you're washing it with salt water like you are for the Quadrello, or you're dry salting, or you're brining, the outside rind is necessary. The salt's necessary to set the rind. So as you go and you eat towards it, it's a saltier piece. But sometimes the rinds can be also plasticky. It's the part we touch. It's the part that actually protects the cheese. So it is utilitarian from that end. Like personally, I don't like rinds of any nature. I like the center of the cheese. But you guys know me for a long time. I'm a bit of a quirky cheese person. But it's completely subjective. And I've read all these books and they're like, you have to eat this rind or you must eat this. But I just don't agree with it. So to answer your question, I don't eat the rind of this often to know, but I can feel it, and I can feel the differences and changes from when I open it up from a vacuum seal. And everybody, what Laura said is really important on how to handle cheese. And one of my friends is on here too. And when he took pictures, I said, oh my God, the Quadrella is vacuum sealed. This isn't a cheese that performs well being vacuum sealed. Open it up right away, let it breathe, and then rewrap it. But it makes sense from a shipper's viewpoint when they have to do a lot of this. It'll protect it for a while. But you should always let your cheese breathe for at least an hour in advance and take it out of whatever packaging it's in, because this packaging is meant to protect it for certain areas, but then it can also work against it and be its own worst enemy. But I feel like the difference is in when a cheese can dry out and it'll be a little more like crystalline on the rind versus when it's younger and more pliable, and it's easier then to eat the rind and have it be softer than as it gets aged.
Well, it is a little bit crystalline. And so I don't know if anybody else got that little bite that I got. None of you?
I did not. My cheese is not too salty, and mine is not even really very strong. It's not strong.
It's
It
not
wasn't strong
no.
when I took it out. So, we're all
No,
having, there are enough people who bought collections that were having cheese off of numerous different
pieces.
squares. So, it's not surprising we're having different experiences. Mine's delicious. I love
think
the creaminess
it's really
of it.
round and easy and not too much of a bite at all. Just has a good savoriness and keeps on kind of evolving and makes me want to keep eating.
I saw. Well, one person in the comments did comment on the in the chat on that they got a bite too. So it is true that we get pieces from different squares and different pieces, maybe made at different times.
Possibly.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
We don't know when you're ordering stuff or we're working with different people. They could have different lots, different batches. Mm-hmm. They sent some things out for some people from 1 week and got a new batch in the next week. There's so many different variables. And we have to remember, cheese is a living, breathing organism. To me, I always call them, they're like kids. So, you have bad hair days, good hair days. You wake up one morning, you just can't talk to it. The next day, it's as docile as anything. So it's a surprise, and that's part of the charm.
What isn't?
Well, I think we should move. Should we move on to our fourth? Okay.
What isn't a surprise here is just the buffalo milk. The richness of it is just you just kind of can't say enough about it. It is just so mouth-filling, unlike any other animal's milk. For me, anyway, it is. And this cheese itself is just a beautiful cheese. So I just want people to really understand that there is a big difference in buffalo milk. We know that there's a big difference in the animal, but the milk and the way we read it on our palate and the way we taste it is quite different, I think. No, not that.
Yeah, it's not just richer than cow's milk. It's like 3 times richer than cow's milk in, fat and protein. So it's a very different experience for the cheesemaker to work with. I want to leave time for this fourth cheese because it's absolutely mesmerizing. This blue, there's nothing like it. It's another one of Michelle's finds. It's a Fior d'Arancio, and let's have the video where we can see how it's made.
The name Fior d'Arancio comes from the type of sweet wine used. It's a pure blue cow's milk cheese, aged a minimum of 2 months. The cheese, before being placed in the container, is drilled with holes so that the wine can penetrate, and then the holes are covered with the Fior d'Arancio wine for about 20 days. Finally, it is dried and covered with candied oranges. The flavor that develops has the typical aroma of the wine and reveals intense and ample aromas of candied fruit, apricot, peach jam, acacia honey, and wildflowers. The taste has extraordinary elegance and personality with good balance between freshness, flavor, and sweetness.
Hello, Sergio. This is the man. I think there's.
Noi stiamo bene, continuiamo a lavorare mantenendoci al sicuro. Facciamo tutti la nostra parte che andrà tutto bene.
Boy,
The end was the
That's
video
good.
that they did during the pandemic. We asked a lot of people just to weigh in because we had a lot of customers saying, how are your producers doing? How is everybody? So they really wanted news. So we tried to get people to just give, to do a quick little video. So that was Sergio, Susie, and Giovanni at the end.
so
So tell us about Moro, who they are and what they do.
Well, you saw Sergio. It's actually the family now. We talk so much about Sergio, but it's not just Sergio anymore. It's Sergio, it's Susie, it's Giovanni. It's also 3 generations here. I've been working with Sergio since 1995 from his Sottocenere cheese. So they are affineurs. They find a cheese maker whose cheese they like, and then they take it and they transform it. The Fior di Rancio came from, they decided to do this whole line of really cool blue cheeses. There is a local wine there, the Fior di Rancio, which is an orange flavored sweet wine that they fell in love with. And they just thought that it would be the perfect cheese to make a blue cheese with this delicate wine and then the candied orange on top. And so you saw the process of how they make it. And this is, each one that they make is different. Some they put in barrel vats and then they close the barrel and they double ferment the cheese. But literally, it's an art, like you were talking about before, of just how they take the cheese, which has to be good itself, and then they work it and can transform it into something completely different.
I just love how they decide, okay, let's take a blue cheese and put it in wine and put it in our local, Moscato. And then let's
drill holes for it.
What?
The drill holes, because the translation instead of saying piercing. So everyone just, if you're making a blue cheese, you pierce it and you add Penicillium roqueforti, so the mold, so that as the cheese is aging, the mold will then grow inside. And when you cut into it, and you'll see all the veining in what you have. And that's what they were referring to in the video, but they were very cutely called it drilling holes. So,
well, that's the translation. What's so interesting about it is that the oranges on top is they're a little salty. So you expect sweet you expect maybe sweet bitter, but I'm getting sweet bitter salt, at least on mine. And I don't know if that has to do with I don't know if they do something or if it's just the penetration of the salt.
It's the penetration from the blue.
And what's so great about this cheese, I don't know what the texture would be like if it had not been soaked in the Moscato, but it's kind of dense and creamy and orangey, but not too orangey, and it's not winey, but it's just kind of orangey. And so Emily, we gave you a tall task here to pair this cheese with one of these wines. Any success?
Well, I love blue cheese in general with sweeter wines or wines with residual sugar. So I actually would, I think wines from Colli or these Fior di Rancio wines are very hard to find outside of markets like New York City. But if you live somewhere like that and can get your hands on a bottle of a Pasito style Moscato, I think that would be a stellar pairing. Maybe outside of that, something like a Vinsanto, but I would definitely go with a dried grape wine with residual sugar if you're really going with a true pairing. As far as these two wines, I think I would lean towards the rosé more than the red. But again, I don't think that either of them are like really sing to me as a perfect pairing.
Yeah.
This cheese also with the fruit on top reminded me a little bit of foie gras. So foie gras would traditionally be served with a sauterne because you want to balance like the fatty salt of the foie gras with the sweetness of the sauterne. But so often you go to restaurants and a chef will prepare some type of fruit compote with the foie gras, and that ends up being a perfect pairing in itself, and you don't actually need the wine. So I kind of view this cheese in that light as well.
And this cheese to me is so distinctive and original and mouth-filling and mind-blowing that if I don't think I would put it with other cheeses on a cheese board. I think it would stand alone. My dessert would be this cheese and a dessert wine, maybe some walnuts, and it can hold your attention for the whole dessert course. It is dessert.
Kind of almonds, I don't know. No.
Yeah,
Well, I have 2 types on my board with Geraldo. I did the ones with the skins.
Yeah.
And then the regular fried and salted.
Okay.
I also have a pear membrillo for all the pairings here. And then I did some Southern Italian Tirali.
Raleigh, a little
Turmeric one.
Oh, I can't resist those. Yeah.
So I just did kind of like a little
cross-cultural
potpourri of things.
Uh,
Yeah.
a little Mediterranean.
All different textures, flavors, looks. And somebody was asking about how do you cut cheeses? And I had even, gone with the cacciatone, and I did my triangles. And then for the paglierino, because it had just so beautiful crystallization, so I took the edge of a knife and I just chiseled that for showing there. And I have a spoon for the fior d'arancia, because that's what it made me want to do, is just put a whole spoon into it. And I had done like matchsticks for the quadrello. So I thought I would share just one of these questions,
Good.
just different ways when you do a cheese plate or arrangement that you don't have to cut everything the same way. So you can just do all that. But I agree with you that the fior d'arancia, like when we're doing pairings of some of the things, I'm like, no, just, it doesn't need it. Let it shine on its own.
It doesn't need another cheese alongside for sure. So Emily, some people are weighing in on their wine preferences for a cheese like this, but one person wanted to know about the sort of regional wine, red wine Amarone with this cheese.
Yeah, I commented in the text box. Amarone is another pasito style wine. Some renditions are fermented dry and are very, very high in alcohol and tannic and a little bitter. I wouldn't necessarily go that route, but if you got an Amarone with some residual sugar, I definitely think that it might mimic a vintage port in that kind of rich, robust, dark fruit and kind of sweetness that would work well with blue cheese.
I don't know. How would port even work with this, with that orange wine coming out in the candied orange peel? I'm having my doubts here on that.
So it wouldn't be my go-to. I think if you took the orange off and just ate the cheese part, that it might work. But like I say, with that fruit component, I think it's already kind of a complete pairing in itself.
There was this winemaker in Oregon who used to do this. It was called Noir. It was like green walnut and one other nut flavor in it. And it was just, it would be perfect with us because it was just very delicate, very laid back, let's say. And it just was perfect for blues and just let them shine. And then it shone with them. Unfortunately, I have never been able to find Keith anymore.
You know what's so
I
amazing?
want to answer a question that I saw, that kind of an interesting question that I saw in the Q&A. I think somebody noticed that in the Quattro Portoni video, there were cheeses hanging from a net bag. And so they asked whether, what was the difference between hanging a cheese and aging it on shelves? And I can get started on the answer, which is that, most of the cheeses that I know of that are hung are very fresh, like young fresh goat cheese that you just scoop up into a bag and you hang it for 24 hours until you drained out enough whey that you've got something you can scoop into a tub and sell right away. But the cheeses that Quattro Portoni had are more aged cheeses, and they're more like scamorza type. Or do you know what they were, Michelle? The ones that they're hanging?
Caciocavallo di bufala.
Caciocavallo.
So stretch curd hanging there. Yeah, and he was just playing with different shapes there. And just how they would come out. But it's so amazing, that cheese. I'd go crazy for it.
But that is not a common technique. Apart from these very fresh cheeses that are aged for a day in a bag, or that are drained for a day in a bag, the only other ones really are these
Delano,
Caciocavallo types,
scamorza. Provolone, you go to the south, provolone, they're hanging,
Yeah, we see that. What I'm finding so amazing about this fior d'arancia is I'm still tasting it. And that was like 20 minutes ago, and not exactly, but it's kind of amazing. I'm tasting it in a good way. Sometimes there are things that last, cheeses that, but this is not one of them. And so just to sort of underscore what you're saying, Janet, about serving this as a dessert course, which of course that's all I could imagine doing with it myself. But your guests would leave, that is, with just such a great memory, sensory memory, because it's not going to go away in a very good way. I think it's a very complex cheese. A lot of times I think that we see flavored cheeses or cheeses with flavor added or fruit added in this case, and we're skeptical. We think it's maybe a way of masking, the sort of lipstick on a pig kind of thing, which it's so not. The only way to have a good cheese that has added ingredients, flavors, or whatever is if the base cheese is a cheese that's excellent on its own.
And that's what we learned
Didn't
from
they-
Sergio, like
Uh-huh.
very early on, because he's famous for a cheese we sell called sottocenere. And there's a lot of really bad truffle cheeses that all you have fermented cheese and too much truffle. And like he always made great base of cheese with the addition of good truffle. So you're right. The base of the cheese always has to be good. And we're the same way though. Like my initial knee-jerk reaction to this was, is this a gimmick? I'm not excited. And then, they prove their worth, because it's just amazing. Just one cheese after the other. They do so many jewels. They're really fantastic. And Giovanni has picked up this passion from his dad, which is fantastic. So I expect more to come. And he's put his younger generation, because the next time maybe we do he does these cocktail cheeses. You must know the Negroni. So they did these pairings with cocktails and cheese, and they made special glasses where you had your cocktail and on top you had a plate to put the cheese on it. Almost like a take on the word tapas from Spain, is because you used to have like a drink and they used to put like a lid or a little plate on top of your drink, and then you get the bite to eat. And that was what a tapa was. And that's kind of what they did for this blue cheese with all these different cocktails, Negroni and Manhattan. So there's a lot of fun things coming from the thoughts, and some of that is a little too gimmicky, but they surprised me with the finesse on the Negroni. But
Well, I don't know where this hour went, but it is gone. And I'm afraid we have to wrap it up. And I just want to thank our guests, Michelle and Emily, for sharing their expertise with us. It's been great to have you. And I hope all of you will come back for more Cheese O'Clock next week on the 4th of March. And again, on March 11th, we have all new cheeses, all new guests. The only repeats are Laura and me. So Laura, any final words?
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I also what's been so fun for me, and I think for everybody, just judging by what I'm seeing in the chat, is that this has taken us on a trip that none of us have been able to take for at least a year. And it's, and it just kind of goes to show that when you choose foods that are of a place, not just from a place, but of a place, it really does transport you there for the moment. And when you combine that experience with food, and especially really good tasting food that happens to be cheese, even better, it's really it's a great journey. And so I'm glad that you all were along that journey with us for this last hour. And I'll just reiterate what Janet said. Please tune in. We'd love for you to have the cheeses and wines the next 2 weeks, but even if you don't, just register for the Zoom link and just join along and enjoy our next journeys. Which the next one, American Women Cheesemakers, is another
nice
kind of a journey.
And winemakers.
And winemakers. Yes, thank you. But that too is its own journey right here in America. So. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, ladies, for
Ciao.
having me.